Hi, welcome to my channel. This is Amber Rain Davis from NotableInk.com, and I'm going to be doing a card for Altenews new release. This one is a little outside of the box in that I'm using some heart stamps to create plants or leaves. You can see different size leaves here. So we're going to be featuring Love Letter stamp set from Altenews. This stamp set has 8 different sized hearts that we'll be using. And then there's also these great sentiments for your Valentine's Day cards. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to be using the Green Valley Green inks, crisp dye inks today. And I'll have all of the products listed below with the specific colors that are used. But I believe this is Firefly, Grassfield, and Mountain Pine that I'm using. I'm starting with one of the larger hearts at the bottom of the plant, and then as I move up the plant, I'm getting smaller and smaller. And then I'm also changing my ink color to go from dark to light as well on most of the plants. You'll see I do a center plant where I do the entire thing in a light color. So at this point, I'm just kind of working out what I want the plants to look like. I'm kind of just testing out to see, okay, is this a style that's going to work to create plants? And I wasn't being too terribly worried about the quality of the stamping per se, because I knew that I was going to be adding hand-drawn details to this. So I wasn't just going to leave it as a solid stamp. I was going to add detail with a Sakura Micron pen. So I decided I needed some smaller hearts on top. I'm sorry I'm a little out of the frame here. And I wanted to make sure that the plants were also going in different directions, adding a little bit of flow to it. And then what I've done is I've just taken a Sakura Micron pen. This is just a black pen. This is an 03. And I'm drawing a stem up the center, and then I'm connecting those halves of each half of the heart is going to create one leaf petal. It's not petal. It's not a petal. It's a leaf. And then I'm going to add a few flowers here. So that pen was dried up, and I felt like it also wasn't a thick enough line, so I've switched over to the 03 Micron. Now, depending upon the pressure that you put on the nib, you can actually get even a thicker line, so you can see the difference in the thickness of the line there. And that can give you a nice look when you're drawing with these pens. So I'm just kind of getting an idea of how many of these flowers do I want and what direction are they going to be in. I generally, whenever I draw these, this was a pattern that I created myself, but when I draw these, for whatever reason, I for the most part, I have them facing to the left, or the flower is opening to the left. I do end up getting one in here that opens to the right, but that's just how my brain works. I always want to open them to the left, but it's a very simple stroke. So you'll get to see it a few times here so that you can recreate it. And I just like to add a few little dots on the end there. So I'll ground the image by adding circles that will turn into gravel or sand. So now we're going to go back to the leaves and add details. So if you followed the last hop of the Build a Flower Poppy, I added a lot of lines to the poppy stamps, and so we're going to do this with these hearts as well. So one of the things that you'll see is right now, obviously the leaves look very flat, very cartoony. Not at all to say that these are going to look realistic by the end, but what you can do with the lines is actually add flow to those leaves. So you can see, because the lines that I'm adding in are curved, it starts to look like the petals or the leaves are bent and kind of flowing outward and cupped in towards the center. So you can add some perspective and dimension to your leaves by adding these lines in a particular curve. You may vary the way that you curve the lines, or you may vary where the insertion point is going to be. For the most part, my insertion point is going to be right at the bottom tip of that heart. But for some of them, I went a little more towards that midline line that I had created in the beginning. Now they were still looking pretty flat to me, so I grabbed my Altenews markers, and these are the Green Field markers. I don't have the markers that go with Green Valley, But I think that's totally okay because you're never going to have leaves in nature that are just one color of green. Also, the Green Valley inks are they're more of a blue green, a very bright green. So the Greenfield markers help to tone that back a little bit and add a little more olive or warmth to the leaves. So I started off by using the lightest color on the lightest leaf and then the mid-tone on the mid-tone leaf. And then what I'm going to do is it's still looking kind of flat to me. So I'm going to add that darkest color down at the tip of the leaves for each one of them to add greater depth. So I'm just playing around. So I knew that I wanted to make leaves or plants with these hearts, but that was really as far as my design plan went. And so this is kind of just creating as you go and figuring out what looks right. So you can see that this darkest marker here is adding a lot of depth to the center of those leaves. And I even add a little bit of that darkest color to the lightest leaves. So I kind of go back and forth and I'm figuring out as we go, like I said, what is going to look best. So that's the plant that I had put in the back that is the lightest color all the way up. I'm not really sure why I did that. I guess technically that should have been the darkest one because it's further away, or maybe it's lighter because it's further away. I'm not really sure. But in any case, I felt like it needed a different color, particularly down there at the base, just to kind of break up all of that color that was in one place. So now I'm just going back with the mid-tone and I'm blending out some of that darkest color. And then I'm pretty sure that I'm going to bring in the lightest marker and blend that out as well. At the time I filmed this, the only alternate markers I had were set A, which has Red Cosmos, Greenfields, and Cool Summer Nights. So I'm going to supplement what I don't have with my Copic markers. So I needed some browns. Again, I'll have the specific browns listed below, but just use what you have if you're trying to recreate this card. And I'm doing a light brown, a mid-tone, and then a dark brown. I think I might even bring in a fourth, even darker brown at the end to add more contrast. But I'm just dotting. I started by dotting the lightest color, then I dotted the mid-tone with a little less dots, and then even less dots for the darkest color. And again, just dotting that on there so that it appears to be textured and isn't just a smooth surface, because I'm picturing it more like stones or gravel, which wouldn't necessarily be smooth. Next up, we'll color in those flowers with the Red Cosmos colors. And I'm going to be using the 3 lightest colors in that series. So the Frosty Pink, Coral Berry, and Ruby Red. And I also wanted to get some kind of peachy colors in there as well. I'm a little strange. I like to coordinate my cards a little bit. And one of the other cards that I had made for this series, for this release, had Peach Perfect from the 4 Scoops mini cube set, and I don't have that marker, so I'll just go ahead and use a Copic to try and match that and add some peach in there. So I'm just trying to build up my contrast, and I started kind of slow because I wasn't sure how much I wanted, and so I'm just slowly adding in that contrast to try and also show some shadow between the 2 edges of that flower. So now I've grabbed an E74 and I'm just filling in those stems a little bit. I didn't want the whole stem to be a peach or pink color, and I'm blending that out with an E70. And after I get the stems filled in brown, I feel like those flowers still don't have enough contrast. So I'm going back in with one of the darker pinks and I'm just adding additional contrast there. Once all the plants were done, I had to figure out what to do with the background. I knew that I didn't want to leave it just plain white. It looked too plain and out of place. So I grabbed one of my lightest markers, the Beige 000, and I'm just adding some streaks of as light as I can get it. And so I'm holding my pencil completely horizontal to the paper so that I can get some streaks in there, because I was starting to feel like this looked more like an underwater scene than out on land. And so I added the streaks of the BG 000, and then I grabbed my warm grays, cool grays. No, not even. It's a BV23, BV23. So the blue grays, and I'm adding a drop shadow underneath the leaves, underneath where anything that would be underneath, I guess, is because now I'm thinking about it as my light source is going to come directly down from the sun above the water. So anything that's kind of bent over, I'm adding a shadow underneath that. Then I'm just taking that BG 000 again and blending out some of that shadow. I do think I went in with a B00 and added some streaks of that as well. And then I didn't feel like the love letter sentiments necessarily went with this scene. So I grabbed the circle sentiment set and stamped out Wild and Free. I'm going to die cut that. And then I used the BG 000 to add a little bit of blue around the edges. And then also flicked up a little bit of that blue on each one of the letters just to add a little more interest, because I thought it looked a little bit strange just being black and white when there was so much color on the rest of the card. To add that extra touch of dimension, I used a white charcoal pencil and just rubbed that along the top of each of those leaves so that it would add a shine to it and give it that just little bit extra of dimension, which I think made a really big difference. In the close-up of the card, I feel like you can really see the streakiness of the background, which is what I was going for the highlights from down above from the sun, kind of going through the water. That was a technique that I learned at the Copic college class that I took over the summer. Michelle just posted her class schedule for 2019. I believe she's got 8 locations, so be sure to check her out at scrapweaver.com. I feel like I learned so much at her Copic coloring class, and I really enjoyed it, so I encourage you to check that out. I hope that you enjoyed this card today and will give something like this a try using your basic shape solid stamps to create something completely different. I think it's a great way to be able to stretch your supplies and get more out of your sets. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button below and consider subscribing, not only here on YouTube, but also on Instagram and Facebook at Notable Ink. And I'll link some other videos at the end of this so you can check those out as well. Thanks again. Have a great day.